Hey guys, so here's Miss Sailor. So this is the second part. We are discussing the second major area to be colonized by the English in the first half of the 17th century. So this is New England. It is differently marked by its founding principles, from the commercially oriented Chesapeake tobacco colonies. These guys are settled largely by waves of Puritans, families in the 1630s. New England had a greater religious orientation from the start. In England, the reform-minded men and women who had been calling for greater changes to the English National Church since the 1580s. Puritan New England had offered them the opportunity to live as they believed the Bible demanded. In their New England, they set out to create this model of Reformed Protestantism, a new Israel. See, the conflict generated by Puritanism had divided English society because Puritans demanded reforms that undermined the traditional values and festive culture. They denounced popular pastime. They did not like the theater where William Shakespeare had produced his masterpieces. They called for an end to it and censoring it. Even the Bible itself became a struggle between Puritans and James I. So James actually commissions a new version to be written. This is the King James Version that we still use today. So, who you have first arriving in Plymouth? This is a lovely image of the different ideologies to help you understand them. The tap water is going to be the Church of England. The filtered water is the Puritans. And then who I'm going to talk about next, which is the Pilgrims or Separatists, is the Desante water, because they are completely different. So these guys settle Plymouth. They are a little bit different, all right? They, 1620, they moved on. They found Plymouth Colony in present-day Massachusetts. They are the first English colony in New England. They're established in 1620, as I said. These guys, their governor is William Bradford. He is a separatist. He and other pilgrims, they had come over on the Mayflower, in which they have the Mayflower Compact that they write. This is Bradford and 40 other men. They signed this. It is an agreement presented as a religious rather than economic rationale for colonization. They express a community ideal of working together. So, when a large exodus of Puritans established the Massachusetts Bay Colony in the 1630s next door, they kind of extend this hand of we should help each other and cooperate with each other. So, you have this Massachusetts Bay Colony that I was talking about. They are established in the 1630s. You also have a couple others. You have the New Haven Colony, that would be New Hampshire. You have the Connecticut Colony, and then you also have Rhode Island. But first, let's start with Massachusetts. So, Massachusetts, it was led by John Winthrop. He's adhering to the doctrine of the predestination, whereby if you elect are saved and all others are must go to purgatory. No one could be sure that they were predestined for salvation, so they must find a glimmer of grace. So therefore, everything is very restricted. Although many people assume Puritans escaped England to establish religious freedom, they proved to be just as intolerant as the English church that they left from. The city on a hill reference here in the slide is he was trying to establish that new English Israel, which is from the Bible, a city upon a hill. So then you have the establishment of Connecticut, which is dissenters from Massachusetts. These are people that are not agreeing with the way Winthrop is handling things in the Massachusetts Bay in the 1630s. One of these people who ends up leaving is banished, I should say, is Roger Williams. He questions the Puritans' he questions the way that they are, the separation from the Church of England, the position of not punishing, and he didn't like the idea the state could not punish individuals for their beliefs. He did accept that non-believers were destined for purgatory, but he did not think the state could compel the true orthodoxy. He also did not like how they were treating Native Americans. Not mentioned in the slides is going to be Anne Hutchinson. She also ran afoul with them because she was criticizing the evolving religious practices in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. In particular, she held that Puritan ministers in New England were teaching a shallow version of Protestantism, emphasizing hierarchy in action. She did not like it. Literate Puritan women like Hutchinson represented a challenge to the male minister's authority. This is part of the reason why she was labeled a heretic. It's not too shocking that these are the people that believed women, because of their weaker sex at the time, this was the belief, that women, because of weaker sex, were more susceptible to evil and to align themselves to become witches, which obviously leads us to the Salem witch trials in 1692. So Roger Williams ends up founding Rhode Island when he's banished from Massachusetts. This is the first colony to offer complete religious freedom, unlike the others that promised it. This is the church. It is the first Baptist church in America that was established by him. There are other colonies that are being established at this time period. You have New Mexico being settled. The French are also settling in Quebec. They also have the fur trade that they develop. The Dutch, or the Netherlands, they have Henry Hudson, who explores New York Harbor. They settle New Amsterdam, which is modern-day New York City, in New Haven. The Dutch are a little bit different than most of other colonists that are coming over and settling in. These guys are a little different because they pay for the property. They also are very much a religious tolerance, open religion establishment for their colony, open practice. So their colony actually featured Jewish and those who practice Islam. So they are a little bit different in that regard. So, when the Puritans began to arrive in the 1620s and 30s, they are having conflict. I don't want you to be confused. They are having issues because they're pushing further interior in New England. There seems to be no end in their expansion. They end up running across a Native American Metacom or Metacomet, or also known as King Philip. He has King Philip's War. The native forces succeed in destroying half of the frontier Puritan towns. However, in the end, the English prevail. They end up being sold, many of them, into slavery in the West Indies. It changed the idea, the English perception of Native Americans at this point. Puritan writers took great pains in vilifying the natives as bloodthirsty savages, which breeds the image ideas that we see a lot in media even today. But everywhere in the American colonies now, there is this crushing demand for labor. The that existed, and it began to grow because of cash crops, especially sugar and tobacco. This need led Europeans to rely heavily on Africans, and after the 1600s, the movement of Africans across the Atlantic begins to accelerate very quickly. The English crown chartered the Royal African Company in 1672. It gives the company a monopoly over the transport of African slaves to the English colonies. So over the next 4 decades, the company transports around 350,000 Africans from their homelands. To give you a good idea of what is going on, I will tell you that from 1501 to 1830, when it is outlawed, some 4 million slaves are brought to the New World. 4 million African slaves specifically. They are brought on the Middle Passage, the transatlantic crossing, which took about 2 months. It's very disheartening when you hear the actual numbers. Everywhere, though, African slaves in the New World are resistant. The running away was very common. In Jamaica and elsewhere, you have this establishment called maroon communities. These are runaways that group together to resist recapture, and they kind of eke out a living from the land to rebuild their communities as best they could. As English settlements are growing in the 1600s, European goods began flooding native communities. Native people began using items for the same purpose as Europeans. Many abandoned their natural animal skin clothing in favor of European textiles. Even clay cookware gives way to the metal cooking implements that we know. Something that Europeans end up introducing to Native Americans was the musket, or the European gun. You also have the introduction of the horse to the Native Americans on the plains. They also changed the environment very quickly. You have the fur trade, which blows and explodes, where Europeans want the furs from the New World. You also have this idea of private property, which changes because Europeans are viewing private property and with fences and things like that, and natives had not used this idea before. You also have the greatest impact on North America, the environment itself, which was disease, specifically smallpox, but there were other diseases as well. There are no immunities in these settlements. Along the New England coast between 1616 and 1618, epidemics claimed about 75% of the native people's population. So it's something to really think about. It was the effects that the colonists had begun having on these places they were colonizing. But that is the Chesapeake Bay colonies, which was Maryland and Virginia, and then the New England colonies, which was Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and some of the other ones that have not been established yet, the New Haven, and things like that.